Hey y'all, what's up? It's V, yeah. And I wanted to do a reading wrap up from everything I've read this year, but it has been a long year, like 27 books long. I got some statistics for y'all. I calculated all these myself, so but I am a nerd for statistics, so here we go. 27 books, 10,085 pages, 373 average length of pages for a book, and 4.2 out of 5 average rating. It's like Spotify Wrapped, but like I'm the only one that cares about it. So the first book that we're going to talk about is One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston, and I gave this book a 3 out of 5 stars, which was really hard for me because it is a LGBTQ women-loving women book, which I think we need so much more of representation, but it was hard to get through. The writing was juvenile, which I do not blame. Actually, I don't think it's a YA because I do get it on a subway, which I cannot talk about this book without mentioning because every time I think about that, like a subway? Anyways, so the plot itself was really compelling. It's about this girl who's like stuck in time on the subway and this other girl comes helps her. Obviously, like more to that, but like time travel, like that's cool, right? But she tried really hard for that diverse representation, so much so that she started playing into stereotypes and made all her characters unbearably quirky, and I just could not get through it because they were annoying me so much. And it's so sad because I wanted that representation and the plot sounded so good. Something that I did appreciate about this book that I don't think should go like untalked about is that it threw in a lot of pieces of LGBTQ history that I didn't know about, that I really appreciated learning about. There was a lot of plot points too that I didn't think were gonna come together, and then they came together really like brilliantly at the end. Even though the ending itself, I was like, girl, like that does not make sense, like that would not happen. So yeah, there were a lot of pros to this book, things that I did like, but it was just so hard to get through. And then completely pivoting away from that, we have Frankenstein by Mary Wollstonecraft, which I gave a 5 out of 5. I think even if you don't read classics, Frankenstein is a must read. It is completely different from what you think. Like Frankenstein in modern media is a completely different entity than the original like source material from Mary Shelley. I find her story so inspirational, like how this story came about, all the different things that it talks about. When you take it in regards to who she was as a person, so brilliant. It was so ahead of its time. I love like taking apart all the characters. Everyone should read Frankenstein, and it is a gothic like icon, you know, like it's Frankenstein. And yeah, I think that's my favorite classic that I've read up till now. It's brilliant. And now we have Unravel Me, the second book in the Shatter Me series. I actually made a whole video talking about the Shatter Me series, so if you want to check that out, then you can go ahead and watch it. And I'm going to leave it short with this book and say I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars, and it is probably my favorite book in the entire series. But yeah, read it! Chances are, if you're watching this video, you've heard of this next book, but it is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid, one of my all-time favorites, which I gave a 5 out of 5 stars. Now, this book was especially relatable to me because I am Cuban and of the same sexuality as the main character, Evelyn, and this author has gotten a lot of backlash for writing minorities and as a white author, but I felt this book gave amazing representation. I think that she really understood it well. This is very character driven. You're gonna hate Evelyn, you're gonna love Evelyn. She's going to teach you things. She's going to make you look at the rough parts of humanity, a lot of bad parts about Hollywood, a lot of bad parts about society and how women get taken advantage of. And I think it's just an amazing read, that an amazing, emotional, well-rounded read. I really love this. I really do love this book, and I think it was really well written. Just put it out there so everybody knows. The plot twist in this is insane, and I guessed it at the very beginning. I made that guess. If you've read the book, you know how insane that plot twist is. And I made that guess before we had met the love interest. That's insane. I've never been prouder of myself, okay? I just need everyone to know. On to the next book. And then we have 2 more books from the Shatter Me series. We have Ignite Me, which is the third one, also one of my favorites. I gave a 4.5 out of 5. And Restore Me, one of my least favorites, which I gave a 3 out of 5. The following books I read during the summer, so they're in my summer recap video, which you could watch, but I'm gonna run through them really quick. Lovely War, 5 out of 5 stars. Defy Me, 4.7. Imagine Me, 2.6. The Games We Play, which I don't own, 4, and The Secrets We Hide, which I don't own, 2. Alex Quizás, 5. These Violent Delights and Our Violet Ends, 5 and 5. Mwah, mwah. I love these. Love on the Brain, 4. And back to your regularly scheduled program with Book Lovers by Emily Henry. This is an amazing fall read. I wish I had read this in the fall or maybe even the winter. I thought it was gonna be a Hallmark small town romance. It's just not my favorite trope. So I was so scared for this. This was not that. She's a New York City girl that gets left behind in the rom-coms. The one where the guy's like, I found horses and farms and I don't love you anymore. And she's like, ugh, whatever, I had work to do anyways. That's Nora. It starts in New York, but it goes to a small town pretty quick. And Charlie, the love interest, is just like her. My type of people. And the atmosphere that this book builds, that is very much city vibes and is so in love with book. This book is such a love letter to books in themselves. And the atmosphere that it builds and just the way that it's all described, beautiful. I loved it. I loved it. It made me feel like I was in New York, curled up with a little book, which is the best feeling ever. I gave it a 4 out of 5. I'm so excited to talk about okay. Next up is El Príncipe Cruel, which is The Cruel Prince in Spanish. I'm rereading all my favorite books in Spanish, and The Cruel Prince is one of my favorite books. I love that trilogy. So yeah, I'm gonna talk about The Cruel Prince. I love The Cruel Prince. Okay, Jude Duarte, marry me please. I love you so much. This is, if you want to get into fantasy or you want to get books in general, this is where you start, because it's not like crazy world building. The writing is really good, but it's really fast paced. It's really simple. It's really easy to get into. Jude is such a baddie. I love the whole notion of like, I am a human and that's what makes me strong. Like, you underestimate me and that's what makes me strong, because I could be conniving. I could use those weaknesses as my strength, and look, you all underestimated me and look where I am. And I adore her so much, and rereading it just made me appreciate her all the more. I love Cardan. I do love Cardan. I think he's so funny. He's so sassy. I adore him. I love them together. I love, oh, well, do not read this for the romance though, because genuinely, like, what makes it so good is not only Jude's character, like, what she's doing, all of the manipulation, all of the betrayal. A work of art, honestly, like a stroke of genius. Like, I don't know what to say. Like, this is where it's at. Basically, this wins 5 out of 5 stars, obviously. Then we have Dance of Thieves, which I gave a 4 out of 5 stars. Here's my grievance with Dance of Thieves. I didn't read the Kiss of Deception series. I thought this was like a new duology in a new world. So I get thrown into this world and I'm so lost. Not in like, you're gonna be missing a lot from the main story, like the lore and stuff, like they reiterate all that. But it does feel like there's a chunk missing. Really heavily recommend this if you read the Kiss of Deception series, which I still haven't. But because it was an amazing book, like, in itself, but I just wish that I had that context because I know how much better it would have been. Also, the writing is a little, not hard to follow, but it is more elevated and very fantasy and very much, like, without having that context. I'm like, oh my god. It was hard at the beginning, but it is beautifully written. I love books about thieves because they'll be saying something and I'd be like writing that down, like taking like mental notes as if I'm ever gonna use it. But I love how it showcases like how smart these characters are, like how clever they are. I love like their dynamic and their love for each other. And it's very heavily reliant on a betrayal that we as an audience know it's coming. And you're like on the edge of your seat with like suspense and like a sense of dread. They're like, oh no, I know what's coming. Oh no, I know what's coming. But like, you don't want it to happen, but like, you're very much enjoying a train wreck. Their relationship is so cute, and it's because of this that she has to do that she's getting in all these situations, but oh my god. Hear me out, okay? Just hear me out. Next up, we have The Never King, which is the first book in the Vicious Lost Boys series, which I gave a 4 out of 5 stars. This book is very spicy. Not like easy stuff either. Like it's spicy, and it's a harem, and it's a reimagining of Peter Pan, But this is not like Disney Peter Pan. Okay, actually older than 19, but they look 19. Like they're not like actual like Lost Boys, you know? And it's very, very lore heavy, like very high fantasy, up to the point where I am now because it's a series. She still hasn't chosen one, but I think that like she has like more emotional attachment with one of them. And it's not a dark, oh, well, it's not abusive. It's not abusive. Everything is consensual. Like, it's not abusive by any means. They actually treat her pretty well, in my opinion, other than like the kidnapping. Very adventure, very goal, very high fantasy. We got stuff to meet, but like in between that, she's like getting like railed. Yeah, just give it a chance. Next up, we have Vow of Thieves, a sequel to Dance of Thieves. I give this book a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I highly prefer this one. Not only just because I'm already used to the world, the longing is beautiful, and I really like the way that I feel like the first book was building up that love, and this second book is showcasing it. They're very well written characters individually, and they were raised very different. They're very different, and you see a lot of consequences to their past in these books. And I really like, especially with the one situation with Cassie, and you see how like her reactions change as it gets continuously brought up, and it just shows her character development as a very like, I'm alone and I gotta fend for myself character. Like as she gains more things that she loves outside of what she originally has, her reaction to the times where she didn't have that change, and I think that's really interesting, and I think she's overall a very interesting character, and their dynamic being so different. Next up is Othello by William Shakespeare. This is my second time reading Othello, but I didn't count it the first time because I feel like I didn't read it like good enough, because I read the No Fear Shakespeare, which I felt personally was cheating. I read this for one of my classes, and this has always been one of my favorites because I think Iago, out of everything, like the way that he drives a story, even though he's such a bad person, like he's so fun to read, like because he's so evil and he's so manipulative. And the characters are really complex, and I really like to dig into them. Not the characters. I made the mistake of saying the characters. It's the relationship between the characters that I find most interesting, especially how they all I think Iago as a character is very interesting, and all his like multiple faces and how it changes, and like his, if you want to like go into like his like motives, but his and everyone's relationship to each other is what I think I find most interesting. And if you're not a Shakespeare girly but you want to read one, I think that Othello is an amazing read. And yeah, I really like it. I liked it the first time, I liked it the second time, but I feel like it's like one of those that you gotta like dig in to appreciate it. Like reading at surface level, you're like, what? And it's really dramatic, and you know, it's not for everyone. Shakespeare isn't for everyone, but I personally really like Othello, and I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. Next up is Foul Lady Fortune by Chloe Gong. I love Chloe Gong. I gave this book a 4.6, which is lower than her other 2 books, just for personal reasons. That I wasn't as into it as I was the other 2, but I think that this is amazing in its own right. You don't need to have read the other 2, but unless you want to get the other 2 spoiled, then you should. This is also historical, and it's spy, which I've never read a spy book before because I feel personally like it would bore me, but it did not. This was very suspenseful. This was very good. I love like finding the secrets with them. It is close proximity, as in like fake marriage, which I love that trope so much. Celia deserves the world, and she's getting the world in the form of Oliver, which I find so amazing. Like, I'm so happy for her. So Rosalind in These Violent Delights was a character that you didn't end up liking a lot, and especially by the end of Our Violet Ends, you're like, oh my god, like Rosalind, like I don't want to talk about her. I really like Rosalind's character development, and using this as a case study on Rosalind and how her actions like impacted her. Not only like her actions, like the guilt of her actions, but what her family did, how all that impacted her, I think was really made us take a look at this character that we had already judged. We had already went, no, I don't want to talk about her, I don't like her, and when like, wait, like think about how she felt, think about how like she was doing, like she didn't mean that. She still does things that are questionable, and it's still very much the same Rosalind from these other 2 books, but you feel more empathy towards her, and you start feeling towards her the same way that you felt towards Juliet, and I think that it's brilliant how Chloe Gong did that. Next up, we have Jane Eyre, which I used to own, but I actually gave away to a friend. I rated it a 3.2, which is a really harsh rating for a classic. I did not like Mr. Rochester at all. I don't know if that was intentional or not, which if it's that, I appreciate that, but it doesn't make up for how much I had to force myself to read literally every part he was in. And then even when Jane was alone, but like after him, like I just was not having fun. I was not having fun reading that. Like I did not enjoy it. I think that it was enjoyable to pick apart. It was enjoyable to see all the ideas of religion and feminism. The one part that I think is really interesting is at the beginning in the religious school. I think that there's a lot of critiques that could be made on religion going off of this book, which is interesting because Jane stays a devoted Christian woman. I really appreciate that complexity in character, looking at the problems in a religious institute. And there's a juxtaposition between Jane and Helen. I think Helen was a really interesting character to break apart too. And she was my favorite part of the book, was just seeing that dynamic and seeing her character. Next up, we have The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, which I gave a 4.9, and that honestly might go down. The reason why it's so close, but like not yet a perfect score, is because I do feel like there was something missing. The idea, because I have the special edition, and V.E. Schwab talks in the beginning about how the idea came to her, and I think that was super interesting. And I love that. I love that type of inspiration and how carefully crafted this book is. I really appreciate all of that, and you could see it. But I do think there was something missing. I think that with someone who has lived so long and all that Addie has been through, we see the skeleton of the lessons she's learned. I feel like she gives us a lot, but there's not a lot of depth to it. Not that I could do it any better. It was an enjoyable read. I really loved it in the moment, but I just felt like I was gonna stop and finish and like look at a wall and like question my entire life. And it didn't do that, but I was expecting it to, so it didn't get that perfect score, but it was really near it, and it was a really good read. It was a really good read. I watched The Age of Adeline a few days ago, which I think might have inspired this because they're very similar. And if you like that movie, then you would really love this too. Then we have Love and Other Words, which I gave a 4.7. Another book that is like, you're so close to perfect, but I don't want to give that to you. My problem with the Love and Other Words is there is one part that is the driving conflict of it all that I think was handled really poorly, and if handled correctly, it would have made such a huge impact, and it would have made it so much more emotional than it already was. And they treated it like a secondhand thing, which I guess like in the context of it did take a little bit of a backseat. But if it would have been handled more carefully, it would have really been amazing. But I think it was handled poorly to the point where I have a problem with it. Seeing their relationship develop like slowly in the past, and then how the ending impacted both of them, and like in the future, it was a really nice read. I read it incredibly fast, so I obviously really enjoyed it. It was such a cute fall romance. Oh my god, it's an amazing fall romance. Please, it's the perfect winter fall season read. But I do think that I had that one problem, and I was like, oh, I can't really get over this, you know? And then we have Lost Boys by Christina Henry, which I gave a 3.7, but I might change to 4. Christina Henry does this thing where she's like, oh, what if villains were actually the good guys, and we just didn't read this correctly, or we didn't have all the context. And the way that it's done is really cool. Takes the character of Peter, and you're like, okay, so he never grows up, but is that really a good thing? Because we have the blind leading the blind, essentially, with the Lost Boys. Having him never grow up, like, so he never sees the consequence to his actions. He never sees the problem. Like, he just wants to play. He doesn't take things seriously. Is being a Lost Boy, like, really a good thing? Like, should we be looking up to Peter Pan like that? I think it was really well done. And it really got you looking at, like, the whole story differently. Like, I think this was a really cool read. Like, I didn't think I was going to like it as much as I did because there's very, very, very little romance. I don't think it was as emotional a read as it should have been. Like, I feel like I should have been more attached to these characters, which may be why it wasn't a 4 out of 5. It's also really gruesome. And it's really jarring to have it be that gruesome while they present as like 12. Finally, I finished reading The Dark One, which is the second book in the Vicious Lost Boys series, yesterday. They're completely different books, Lost Boys and The Vicious Lost Boys. Completely different, but I was already on like the Peter Pan train, so I was like, okay, I'll continue with continuing that series. The first one was a lot more focused on the smut. This one's like, okay, building up the lore, building up what we're doing, building up their characters a lot. Like, we're looking deeper into a lot of their characters, and I don't want to say much because I feel like I'm gonna spoil it. It's also like oddly wholesome. Like, it's kind of found family. They're best friends, you know? But yeah, really good continuation of the series. I gave it a 4 out of 5. And we are done. So I really hope you enjoyed that, and yeah, just yeah